Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Fadi Zatari. I am a research fellow at Center for Islam and Global Affairs. I would like to welcome you to our new book discussion. This is 28, our 28 discussions. And today we have, for me, a very special topic, partly on Taha Abdul Rahman. Last year we hosted also 5 speakers to talk about the book was edited by Mu'taz al-Khatib and Muhammad Hashas. We also talk about the book and we read it. Today we have a different aspect for reading Taha Abdul Rahman, more critical, I think, reading for Taha Abdul Rahman, comparing Taha Abdul Rahman with a different Western systematic philosopher very known in the West. Today, our speaker and author of the book, Professor Obiedat, who is from Wake Forest University from the US, he will be presenting his a new book. Actually, the book will be published in 2 or 3 months, right? I was very honored to read the draft for that book and to see this really important contribution. Because as most of you, maybe the people following what is written on Taha Abdul Rahman, we still have very little books and articles written on Taha Abdul Rahman. We just get in the last year Wa al-Halaq, as well as the book I mentioned before. This is the mainly 2 books, and I think this is like one of the important also book on Taha Abdul Rahman, comparing him to a Western philosopher. I will give the speaker 30 to 40 minutes to present the book, and then we will go to the details about, we will go to questions. And if you have any question, you can either write them in the group here or text them to me on WhatsApp group. And then I will be trying to ask our speaker as much as I can. Yes, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us, and I am very happy that we managed to organize this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zatari. Thank you, and assalamu alaikum to everybody. I'm thankful to receive this kind invitation to speak to the bright minds of your institution. I'm also glad to see the growing interest in the philosophy of culture where my book is located. And just to add, the book will appear in electronic version within 3 weeks, March 15th, as I was told, and then the paper copy will appear after that. So let's start. In the West, several revolutions have been conceived as characterizing the modernization project. Chief among them were science unveiling the mysteries of nature, democracy advancing over tyranny, technology and capitalism bringing prosperity, secular humanism articulating universally applicable ethics. Although these are generally considered to form a matrix of positive outcomes, many in the West, both scholars and members of the general public, are aware of the dark side to modernity. Consequently, they envision either a reformed modernity or a post-modernity. For Arab-Islamic culture, which have deep pre-modern roots, the perceptions of modernity are staggeringly different. Their experience of modernity's dark side can be seen in a second matrix. This time of negative outcomes: 1, environmentally, the Arab world, as with the Third World more generally, suffered degradation and exploitation of its natural resources. 2, politically, it suffered external colonialism and internal dictatorship. 3, economically, wealth flowed to the former colonizers and westernized elites. 4, spiritually, Arabs suffered mockery of the very culture that made them historically literate and sovereign, that is Islam. A concomitant judgment of many in the Arab world, along with some within the West itself, is that they would rather remain alive in whatever pre-modern manner than be killed for the sake of modernity. Again, they would rather remain alive in whatever pre-modern manner than be killed for the sake of modernity. Modernity is the label denoting many of the changes humanity has experienced over the course of the past 5 centuries. Moreover, modernity is often the banner of the forces leading those changes, as well as the object of those fighting them. Descriptively complex and normatively controversial, modernity can be seen as the mother of all humanity's novel problems. Does it remain, paradoxically, their best solution? This book, Modernity and the Ideals of Arab-Islamic and Western Scientific Philosophy, is a book that envisions modernity's best case scenario, the scenario of a modernity that benefits both post-colonial and Western peoples without harming them. Contrasts with the views of modernity and modernization that now dominate Western and Arab-Islamic discourses. The West versus the rest is one of modernity's central predicaments, and the Arab-Islamic world is among the rest, which has paid and continues to pay a great price for modernity. In Arab-Islamic context, the consideration of modernity has been left to 2 spectrums of thought. The first is sectoral, non-systematic, uninformed by the rich Arab intellectual heritage. It runs from militant atheism to religious fundamentalism. The second is absolutist, reactionary, and dismissive of cross-civilizational learning. It ranges from Western-centric imperialist worldview to one espousing the native infallibility and postmodernism. Modernity and the ideals of Arab-Islamic philosophy, modernity and the ideals of Arab-Islamic and Western scientific philosophy, instead, seeks a philosophical grounding for the modern ideal, a grounding informed by the Arab-Islamic context and in contrast with the pre-modern and post-modern perspectives. A descriptive understanding and a normative evaluation of modernity at the crossroads of the Arab-Islamic and Western worlds invites a multilateral philosophical conversation. Unfortunately, Arab-Islamic and Western philosophical conversation is largely immature, if not entirely absent. In the West, Arab-Islamic philosophy is perceived to have died with Averroes, Ibn Rushd, 1172. And no conversation can be fruitful with a dead counterpart. In Arab-Islamic world, Western philosophy is perceived to have lost interest in addressing the fundamental problems of philosophy, i.e., the triad of knowing, being, and acting. In this line, several Arab thinkers gave up on modernity following the advancement of postmodern philosophy. With its vindication of obscurity, irrationalism, anti-realism, and post-virtue. Within the larger Arab world, these postmodern fashions came to be viewed as the essence of Western modernity. So, between, on the one hand, a false perception of the death of the Arab-Islamic philosophical counterparts, and on the other, a pseudo-characterization of modernization as a fundamentally flawed postmodern path, Both parties fell into the misconceptions of modernity. My book, Modernity and the Ideals of Arab, Islamic, and Western Scientific Philosophy, seeks to dispel these dual misconceptions, arguing by way of dual counterexamples. It presents a Western representative, Mario Bunge, whose work embodies the ideals, whose existence in the Western world the Arab-Islamic camp denies, i.e., clarity, comprehensiveness, adherence to the scientific outlook, and respect for global human and social values. In parallel, it presents an Arab-Islamic representative, Taha Abdurrahman, whose work embodies the ideals, whose existence in the Arab-Islamic world the Western camp denies. These are knowledge of contemporary Western philosophy, organic growth from an Arab-Islamic heritage, logical consistency, and sophistication of discourse. Considering the divergence between their respective philosophies, the central argument of the book is that the common ground between Western and Arab-Islamic worldviews is to be found, first of all, in modernity's best-case scenario, that is, equitable prosperity with beneficial stewardship of the natural world. Just as a long history of harmful treatments has not disqualified medical endeavor, the harmful ideologies, institutions, and technologies that have arisen in some versions of modernity should not disqualify modernity itself as an ideal, providing real benefit to humanity. The second ground between Western and Arab-Islamic worldviews is their traditional appreciation of logical rationality, which I expand into the principle that the right to characterize falsity is coupled with the duty to abide by truthfulness, or in Arabic, إن الحق في نقد الخطأ يوجب فريضة التسليم بالصواب. Excuse me for a second. The developing world, and the Arab-Islamic world in particular, has every right to counter the destructive aspects of modernity. Nonetheless, when these efforts go to the extreme of denouncing the naturalistic, rationalistic, and humanistic basis of the modern project, the Arab-Islamic world loses any prospect of advancing sustainable global human welfare and forsakes the only method that can elevate its own impoverished conditions. These are science-based sustainable human development coupled with rational institutional organization. In short, the right to criticize misguided modernity leads to the duty to accept its best case scenario. And this is the common ground between the Western and Arab-Islamic worlds. The chapters of the book centrally addresses the following questions. Chapter 1, why worldviews do matter. Chapter 2, what is modernity and how to evaluate it. Chapter 3, can religious, secular, and scientific worldviews be demarcated? Chapter 4, can there be a modern and systemic worldview? The case of Mario Bunge. Chapter 4, can there be an Islamic, modern, and scientific worldview? The case of Taha Abdurrahman. Chapter 6, can we map out reality, the modern worldview and its metaphysics? Chapter 7, can we attain knowledge, the modern worldview and its epistemology. Chapter 8, can we act virtuously? The modern world and its ethics. In chapter 9, why postmodern family ethics cannot be universalized. Taha's argument. In chapter 9, what is Taha's new mystic ethical political response to the current predicament of the Arab-Islamic world? And finally, chapter 11, or before the last, who has won the battle of philosophical modernizers, Taha or Bunge? And finally, chapter 12, what is the future for philosophical system building and the philosophy of religion? Let me now read some examples that might attract the listeners to the substance of Taha and Mario Bunge's philosophy. In the third chapter, I reveal that the modernization of Arab-Islamic philosophy went into 4 stages. The first stage involved a variety of non-theoretical reforms between 1800 until the end of Second World War, which is practically between Tahtawi until Taha Hussein. The second stage focused on the translation and absorption of Western philosophy from Second World War until the 70s, where Abdurrahman Badawi seems a prominent example. While the third was marked by the application of Western philosophical doctrines to the Arab-Islamic concerns between the 70s and the 90s. So we have an Islamic Marxist interpretation by Tayyib Tizini. We have a phenomenological interpretation by Hassan Hanafi. We have other applications to many Western philosophical doctrines. And then the fourth and present stage, since the 90s, is characterized by the emergence of philosophical creativity, where Taha Abdurrahman and Abu Ya'rub al-Marzuqi are the main examples, and I mainly chose Taha Abdurrahman, and hopefully Abu Ya'rub will be considered in a future opportunity. I'd like to give a sample example of one paragraph taken from Taha Abdurrahman, and how his linguistic emergence and how his thinking and translation led him to thoughts in cultural understanding, and how to absorb Western creativity by the terms of Arab-Islamic creativity. So this is a paragraph on translation. Taha says, translation has to take another path in order to reach ideal modernization, which is what I call explorative path. This path can guide the Muslim Arab speaker along the journey of inventing equivalents to the original Western text. This is in turn would open the door to modernizing Arab-Islamic thought from the inside. This path requires proposing 3 translations for the same text with different types of manipulation, taking responsibility for being independent from the original. These 3 in order are logical translation to expose the structure of the argument, semantic translation to reveal the meaning, and grammatical translation to uncover its linguistic structure. This explorative perspective for translation flips the transmitting perspective of translation upside down, for transmission makes the language of the original text the first priority, meaning the second priority, and argument the third. This way, syntax influences meaning, and that syntax influences meaning, and that the argument. Conversely, explorative translation gives priority to consideration of the argument over meaning and priority to consideration of meaning over syntax. In this way, the argument is influencing meaning and that affecting syntax. True, an intellectually creative modernization would not begin except without obtaining the structure of the argument from the translated text. There is no modernization for Islamic Arab thought except by that first step of creativity and its continuity. So this was the example I took from Taha Abdurrahman to bring a tasting sample of how he looks at modernization and how translation is part of this. I would like now to present shortly, and everything I've mentioned so far covers practically 2 or 3% from the content of the book. So I promise every listener that there is more content and more substance to the book, more than what they are hearing from you right now. Let me present to you other interesting point of view from Mario Bunge. These are the 7 theses of a scientific and humanistic worldview presented by Mario Bunge. Bunge states, we have principle 1, cosmological or ontological. To him, whatever exists is either natural or man-made. Put negatively, there's nothing supernatural in the real world. 2, the anthropological principle. Individual differences among people pale by comparison with the common features that make us all members of the same species. Put negatively, there are neither superhuman nor master races. The axiological principle number 3. Although different human groups may care for different values, there are many basic universal values, such as well-being, honesty, loyalty, solidarity, fairness, security, peace, and knowledge that are worth working or even fighting for. Put negatively, radical axiological relativism is false and harmful. The 4th epistemological principle. It's possible and desirable to find out the truth about the world and ourselves with the sole help of experience, reason, imagination, criticism, and action. Put negatively, radical skepticism and epistemological relativism are false and noxious. The 5th principle. Moral. We should seek salvation in this world, the only real one, through work and thought rather than prayer and war. And we should enjoy living as well as trying to help others live instead of damning them. 6th principle, the social. Liberty, equality, solidarity, and expertise in the management of the Commonwealth are fundamental social values worth working or even fighting for. And the 7th principle, political. While defending the freedom and to religious worship and political allegiance, we should work for the attainment or maintenance of a secular state, as well as a fully democratic social order, free from unjustified inequalities, and advocate unavoidable technical bunglings. So these are the 7 principles that Mario presents for us. Interestingly, I go into how epistemology is shaped, how ontology is shaped, and how ethics is shaped according to a systemic scientific worldview. And later on, I contrast that with the work of Taha Abdurrahman and find out the mismatch between the 2 philosophies and what's missing in Bunge and what's missing in Taha Abdurrahman, and what are the commonalities between both of them. Because we have 3 times, right, Dr. Fadi? We have 3 minutes.
We have more, even 10 minutes.
Okay, that's wonderful. So I can present one figure. Can you give me the possibility of sharing a picture?
Timur. Timur will do this.
Okay.
Timur, are you there? Yes.
I think I was able to share it. Is it visible?
Yes, very good.
Okay. So interestingly, and after a detailed survey, and I will enlarge the shape. Is it visible to everybody? Okay. So Bunge here presents us the major levels of existence. He starts with the physical, number 1, chemical, number 2, biological, number 3, and social. The interesting thing that there is a continuity of the levels of the world. There is no disconnection. The world is unified. And to prove that, the physical world presents us with the atoms and their elementary particles. And we move to the chemical world, where it's made of molecules. And as everybody knows, molecules are composed of atoms. Atoms present us with hydrogen and oxygen for the physical world. Molecules is one example of a unity of certain atoms, and this presents us with H2O, which is water. Now, these molecules engage into further complexification, which lead us to the cells, organs, organisms, which means that human individuals, animals, are analytically analyzable to the molecules, and molecules are analyzable to atoms, and atoms to the lower levels of physics. And if we go up, these creatures engage in cognitive behavior, and they later on they compose societies, and these societies engage into production of wealth, that is economics, manipulation of power, that is politics, and manipulation of symbolic worlds, that's culture. So amazingly, we finally have a philosopher in the end of 20th century who is willing to embrace the unity of the scientific world, humanistic world, and naturalistic world, without giving the superiority of one science over another. He doesn't claim that language is physics. He doesn't claim that social science is chemistry. But he's saying there's a continuity in the disjoints between each field of science that can be traceable and can be detectable. So this is at least his presentation. Okay, somebody asked me to expand the graph. I'll expand it. This is the levels of existence in the world, and I should move to the other topic right now. Is the second slide visible? Okay. So here we see another achievement of Mario Bunge, where it's extremely lacking in our Arabic philosophy. We don't have a modern Arab philosopher who can tell us what is the current status of modern human knowledge. What is the tree of knowledge? If we open the pages of Taha Abdurrahman or Abdurrahman Badawi or Zaki Najib Mahmoud or Abdul Wahab al-Misiri, we don't know where to start. how all the disciplines of the world, truthful or untruthful, scholarly or unscholarly, they are going to merge in one unit where everything is derived from the same tree. And here we see that the tree of knowledge is we have the ordinary knowledge that humans have in daily life, and we have the scholarly knowledge that Bunge calls all of it science. So it's not only the natural science, he includes linguistics in that science, and he includes ethics, he includes literature, if it's properly done. Science is divided into two realms, which is taken from Leibniz. We have factual and formal. And formal is the easiest, the smallest of the two branches, because it involves logic, mathematics, semantics, and some the applications of these software computer science. So here we are not dealing directly with reality. We're dealing with the symbols that are fictitious in our mind. However, they have certain properties of consistency and generation that they generate their own logic. And when we move to the factual world, he splits the tree again to the natural and the social. In the natural world, we start from physical reality, chemical, biological, and psychological. All these four branches are practically part of the natural world. And I should stress that the psychology here in the middle is split between the natural science and the social science. If we talk about the hormones of the human body, they are extremely natural, part of the neuroendocrinological system. If we talk about festivals, jokes, comedy, they influence the psyche, but they are part of the society. So we can have a social phenomena that hormonally influence the psyche. We can have a chemical phenomena that generates certain hormones to influence the psyche. So the psyche in this case is a middle link between the natural world and the social world. And anybody who's seeing the sun of Istanbul will be happy. And when they go to darker, cloudy countries, they will lose that sun. Their psyche is influenced by that. So this is a very simple example how a natural phenomena can influence an internal psychological phenomena. Of course, if I present this 2,500 years to the philosophers of Greece, they would say, of course, that's a truism. Unfortunately, in modern time, we need to stress this point because people denies the relationship between the natural world and the social world. We move to the social world, and we have the manipulation of power, which is political science, manipulation and management, I should add, manipulation and management of wealth economics, and the manipulation of carriers of identity in sociology. And then we have history and culturology. And in culturology, we have the bulk of what humanities have generated in stories, in fables, in proverbs, in drama and whatever. And they have three major branches: ethics, literature, and aesthetics. So now we have a complete set of the continuation and the connectability of the branches of human knowledge. And in this way, we can figure out where is a field claiming abuse. Can physics abuse ethics? And can ethics abuse physics? And when we put them next to each other, we can find a balanced understanding where these fields are going to be situated next to each other. And in this case, we understand that Taha Abdurrahman, within this tree of knowledge, is actually situated not only in the factual world, not in the social world, because he so far has not presented to us a theory of political science or a theory of economic behavior, but he is a philosopher of culturology, that his main concentration is on the literary and ethical and aesthetic points of view. Is this legitimate? Is this productive? Certainly it is. However, for the major modernization project that Taha Abdurrahman advocates. He doesn't tell us how culturology is built over sociology that is in need of an economic and political project, and how all of the social sciences are in turn built over the natural sciences, and how all of the natural sciences composing the factual world are built or related on the formal sciences. So in this case, Bunge helps in furnishing, in fledging out, in mapping the tree of knowledge, where we can understand where is Taha Abdurrahman's project. And then in turn, we can understand that the limitations of the projects of Taha Abdurrahman and the innovations of that project, because Bunge is not going to help us in an ethical, literary, and aesthetic content related to the Arab-Islamic philosophy. He is away from these fields. So we are now taking a mutual cooperation. The cooperation where Bunge is presenting us with the tree of the disciplines, and where Taha Abdurrahman is restricted in part of this tree, but we can now appreciate his creativity without dismissing some of his claims about the natural world. I think I have 2 minutes now. Okay. And in order to conclude, I should say that I ended the presentation with the crux or the crucial problem where Taha Abdurrahman stumbles, where he always calls for an epistemology based on revelation, on wahi. And surprisingly, the remedy to resolve Taha Abdurrahman's weakness is no one other than Abu Ya'rub al-Marzuqi. So I take the interpretation of wahi to meet this scientific endeavor that Bunge seeks from Abu Ya'rub al-Marzuqi, and I would like to read this paragraph starting from the top. But what does revelation mean in Quranic terms? In order to understand that, we have to go to gather how I'll just stop the sharing. In order to understand that, we have to gather how the Quran uses the term over multiple instances. All of them are united by an underlining meaning of indirect signification between two parties. For example, the revelation can be signs that insects can read, as in the verse, and your Lord revealed to you by saying, make hives in the mountains and in the trees and in what they build. Likewise, revelation can be indirect signification that a mother perceives, as in verse 28:7 regarding the story of Moses. So we sent this revelation to the mother of Moses, suckle your child. Other verses have revelation occurring between non-divine beings. Moreover, the Quran is very explicit that all its revelation is rather made in the language of Muhammad, or the word choice of Muhammad, as in verse 1997, and we make the scripture easy in your tongue, O Muhammad. This revelation, according to the Quran, is never the direct speech or literal instruction of the divine. That this is a natural Quranic understanding is emphasized by considering that the word of Quran itself means reading, while the Quran calls its own verses or sentences ayat, signs. In other words, Quran is the process of reading the signs of nature and the self. The Quran again describes itself. We will soon show them our signs in the universe and in themselves until it will become quite clear to them that it is the truth. If revelation is true communication to humans that can be found in nature and the self, then it is quite an open-ended process that can be further perfected by science and philosophy. Here, Taha reveals in the fourth stage of modernization journey of Islamic philosophy Here Taha's rival in the fourth stage of the modernization and journey of Islamic philosophy, Abu Ya'rub al-Marzuqi, gets it right. He takes this verse within the Quranic framework to mean there are two dimensions, negative and positive. The negative indicating that the truth is not to be sought from the text of the Quran. You can find pharmaceutical products from the Quran. And positive one indicating that it is to be sought by directing the search for truth where the truth can be found, i.e. the signs of the horizon, ayat al-athaq, natural and mathematical laws, and the selves, historical laws of morality. So here we find that the final remedy and the final disconnection between Taha Abdurrahman and Mario Bunge is actually available and provided by Abu Ya'rub al-Marzuqi. All what I have presented so far covers less than 5% of the book. There are meticulous details and definitions, particularly how I define the difference between religion and secularism, how I define the difference between secularism and religion and science, and how worldview is defined, how all of these substantive proposals resolve many debates in political science and cultural understanding. And I hope it can be a step forward in our cultural debates. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to hear your questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I am very happy to listen to this because after reading the book, I think this was not an easy read. Absolutely. I think it needs like more deep reading, because especially for the people who are not aware with one of the philosophers or maybe both of them. This is like, we need, like, for example, the picture you showed from page 175, it was like complicated to understand the connection, why he select the way he did, why he put ethics on some aside, on the side, where is the religion exactly. Maybe we can also talk about this because the religion was put with ideology. I am interested also to know more about the role of religion, especially for Taha Abdurrahman. We know that religion is absolute the foundation for his philosophy. But before we starting with this question, maybe I would like to just to ask how you decide for these two philosophers. I think both are really famous, great, productive, systematic, deep philosophers known in the West and also in the Arab country, especially Taha Abdurrahman. So how you decide for this two?
Excellent, excellent. So if an average Arab intellectual who would like to study Western philosophy, they would start with Abdul Wahab al-Misiri, learning about postmodernism, or George Tarabishi, learning about Freudianism, or reading Abdurrahman Badawi, learning about existentialism, or Tayyib al-Tizini, learning about Marxism. So the first question is, I'm somebody who studied Jurjani, Ghazali, Ibn Sina, and Ibn Khaldun. And when Abdurrahman Badawi is telling me, look, Heidegger is the example. Tarabishi tells me, look, Freud is the example. Abdul Wahab al-Masiri tells me, there's no example. I'm just taking the inspiration of the Frankfurt School of Horkheimer, Adorno, and the critics of postmodernity. Or finally, we see that, oh, Foucault is the example. It will be extremely problematic. Where is the ideal in all these figures? First, they are hardly readable. And if they are readable, they are extremely sectoral. None of these philosophies, psychoanalysis, existentialism, postmodernism, or Marxism, cover the disciplines of knowledge. They don't have a view what is natural sciences and how natural sciences lead to social sciences and how social sciences lead to human sciences and how all of these are related to mathematics and logic. We don't have that. And if I'm well cultivated in Islamic heritage, and if I read Shatibi from Usul al-Fiqh, and let's say Al-Qadi Abdul Jabbar in Ilm al-Kalam, and Muhyiddin ibn Arabi in Al-Tasawwuf, and finally Ibn Khaldun in history, I'll think that medieval Islamic civilization is clearer, more meticulous, more systematic, and more convincing than anything that Freud, Heidegger is presenting to us, or Michel Foucault. So the conversation between the Arab-Islamic intellectual and the Western world has been blocked from the first moment. How can I have a conversation with a text that I can't understand, such as the text of Heidegger? Or how can I make a conversation with Freud, where the basis of scientific analysis is not available? All what he says, many examples of his statements are derived from literature and dreams, and it's very hard to establish evidence based on that. So in this case, Mario Bunge is a shocking example. He is clearly writing a readable language. He is systematic in the same style of Al-Ghazali, Ibn Khaldun, and Ibn Sina. His treatise on basic philosophy, 9 volumes, covers philosophy of language, 2 volumes, metaphysics in 2 volumes, theory of knowledge in 2 volumes, 2 small volumes in social sciences, and finally ethics in the last 8th volume, which means that finally we have somebody who has a PhD in nuclear physics, who's informed about social science and ethics, and we have somebody who is writing about ethics and social science, but he is completely updated by what Darwin, Einstein, and Niels Bohr have presented to us. This is very rare. Mario Bunge becomes this ideal. On the other side, if we take the example of Bernard Lewis, one famous Orientalist, or if we take the example of philologists or Christian philosophers, let's say Hans Kung, a very famous Catholic theologian, highly informed, and proposes his own proposals to the clash between Christianity and modernization. If we ask these, if these individuals are asking, give me an example where I can read about the modernization of Arab Islamic philosophy, we will be in great predicament. What should we give Hans Kung an example? Should Hans Kung be given, let's say, a book by Yusuf al-Qaradawi? Well, Yusuf al-Qaradawi has great creative thinking in jurisprudence circles, but certainly he's not informed about philosophy. So he's not going to impress Hans Kung. Let's move from Hans Kung and give Sayyid Qutb. Well, Sayyid Qutb has his own creativity in interpreting the Quran, but he certainly he doesn't know how to compose logical system in his writing. So let's go to other examples. What about if we give Hans Kung an example such as Abdurrahman Badawi in existentialism? But in this case, Hans Kung will say, but this is not Arab-Islamic philosophy. It's written in Arabic, but it's a German translation of German existentialism. So in this case, we give multiple examples from Freudianism, phenomenology, Nietzscheanism, Marxism. We can't find a single figure before Taha Abdurrahman who is writing in the same systematic manner that Al-Ghazali is doing, while he is not Western in essence. What he's presenting to us is not a repetition, is not a translation of some available Western philosophy. These are the innovative thoughts of Taha Abdurrahman. So in this case, Taha Abdurrahman become an ideal example. Although Abu Arab al-Marzuqi could be another one, but since I started this project in 2006 and I submitted my PhD dissertation in 2010, Abu Arab did not complete full circle of his publications by that time. There is a great deal, practically Abu Arab al-Marzuqi after 2008, 2/3 of what he wrote appeared after 2008, not before that. So in this case, from a time limitation, I could not cover him. So the idea is why Bunge and why Taha Abdurrahman is rather flipped are there other than Bunge and Taha Abdurrahman. And these are like, could be shocking statements to many philosophers and many readers, and they would say these are extreme exaggerations. But I think the book should convince these people that I really can't find an Arab-Islamic philosopher before Taha Abdurrahman. Some people would say, but what about Iqbal, and what about other Persian and Turkish philosophers? Certainly, there are these philosophers, but I can't cover them because I'm concentrating on the Arabic literatures. So this is a cultural restrictions. There are no way for a philosopher to cover all other cultures without going into the details of the literary aspect of their language. And I'm not able to cover Turkish, Hindi Urdu, and Persian in the same way as I'm covering Arabic. So I leave the task of revealing the creativity of other Islamic civilized nations to those specialized in that. So I hope this responds to your question, why Bunge and why Taha?
Excellent. Thank you very much. This is more than what I was expecting. Thank you very much. The second question is about religion. Please, before I ask the question, if you have a question, you can post them here or you can write to me directly about religion, okay? Because I read Taha Abdurrahman and I am very aware of his project. And we know like religion is really very important for him. And when he asked like different nations, they have the right to have different modernity, right? And then he asked, what is the contribution of the Muslim? And then he said, faith and ethics, right? So faith and ethics are both important, but I will
and language and language.
Of course, yes. But I will ask the question on religion later. I will move to ethic in the next question. I would like to understand, like, what I know you wrote one chapter or one part in the third chapter on religion. So please elaborate a little bit more about the common and differences between the both philosophers, how they understand religion.
Okay, thank you very much. Chapter 3 is the fountain of the rest of the book, because I discuss religion not in terms of its substance, such as monotheism or Trinity, or monotheism of Islam, Trinity of Christianity, or let's say duality of Taoism. I discuss religion through what it seeks to achieve. And through analysis, I find 3 goals: psychological goals, social goals, cognitive goals. Psychological goals as in serenity and counseling the self and hope, because in an absence of hope and serenity, people are in disturbance and looking for either depressed or inhabited by suicidal thoughts. So religion, in the general Abrahamic availability of the traditions, provides a solution to the psyche. Second, religion presents us an understanding about what is the world, when did it start, what's going on right now, and when will it end. So there is a line of time. It can be a circle of time, but it's not total randomness. We have a hierarchy of existence. So there are some cognitive goals in religion. Now, third, the social element, religion seeks to provide us with laws. Thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt not steal. Religion asks you, do to your brother what you want to do upon to yourself. So these ethical norms assist the human individual how to live in a society, and furthermore, there is the mosque, there is the temple, there is the church, where there's a gathering place where the dissemination of ethics can take place. So we have the psychological goal, social goal, and cognitive goal. Now, ironically, for the advocates of secularism, a secular worldview seeks also to fulfill psychological, cognitive, and social realms. So in secularism, let's say you're embracing an evolutionary worldview of the world. In society, you're saying that the city hall is where people should be gathering. In psychology, you think that arts and literature should counsel the soul. So we can see that religion and secularism, in the general understanding, seeks to fulfill the same goal. So now we would ask ourselves, where is the difference? We can find a difference. Some people, they will say, oh, wait a minute. Superstitions is the difference. Because in religion, some people would sit and say, oh, let's pray for somebody who is dying and they might be cured. Well, I'll tell them, wait a minute. These superstitions do exist in a secular individuals. So superstitions in religion and in secularism are equally available. Others would say, no, we think that religion has an ideology, the ideology of wilayat al-faqih, or the ideology of the supreme leader, or the supreme jurist, or the ideology of ardul mi'ad in Judaism. The same applies to secularism. We have a Marxist ideology. We have a Maoist ideology. We have, let's say, French ideology that worships the state. So we also can find a demarcation. So what about the cognitive one? We have mythical understanding in religion. The same can be found in secularism, such as the idea of al-uqul al-ashara, the 10 planetary deities that were embraced in Hellenistic philosophy, where some people thought that the sun and the moon and Mars and Venus are actually gods, and they are influencing the lower sphere on Earth. These are certainly myths, and secularism does embrace mythology, as we can see in Freudianism, which is a myth. So in this case, if religion and secularism both call for cognitive goals, social goals, and psychological goals, and both can achieve this efficiently and non-efficiently by ideologies, superstitions, and mythologies, how can we find a difference? I propose a difference. And before anybody critiques this, the difference will not mean that I will be siding with secularism. Actually, I will be siding with science. So I'm talking about three realms: the religious, the scientific, and the secular. This one, and I will share the screen. What is secularism? This is word by word taken from the book. In light of our understanding of religion, section 3.2, in terms of its fundamental role, secularism, or a secular worldview, may be understood as a cultural means within particularly literary traditions, without sacred canons, thus allowing for foundational change in order to achieve psychological, cognitive, and social goals, whether efficiently or not. So the lack of foundational canons in secularism makes them, and the ability to accept change makes them secular. Now, somebody would say, would you say that the major founders of religions, such as I have to close this phone for a second. Accept my apology for this. So the ability of the secular system to start again, to move, to let's say for Soviet Union to say, we will begin from the thoughts of Marx. And then after the collapse of Soviet Union, the Yeltsin and the Russian elite, they would say, we'll start from liberalism. This is secular activity. They are willing to withdraw and abandon the foundations and start with new foundations. Now, is this good or not good? Certainly it has its problems, but it has its flexibility. There's the capacity to start again. However, I'm not siding with the secular worldview because I'm siding for something that can give us a restriction. And the restriction can be found here. What is a scientific worldview? Scientific worldview as a cultural means based on certain fundamental principles of inquiry, ethical, rational, and empirical, having certain fundamental outlook, materialism and realism, advancing from an improvable fund of background knowledge, having no sacred literature, so as to be eager for epistemic progress in order to achieve psychological, cognitive, and social goals. The foundations of the Abrahamic religions are their sacred canonical texts. The foundations of secular worldviews in generally may be anything, but they are not sacred canons, while the foundations of science and the scientific worldview are minimal, but crucial set of principles that allow for better, encourage, advocate, and call for the incessant epistemic progress. So in this case, we have at least a medium of arbitration. We can take the social, psychological, and cognitive goals of religion, and science can help in achieving them. And this takes me back to your question. I think you asked me, what is the relationship between ethics and religion? Was it your question, or do you want to put it in different words?
Yes, almost. I want to ask about also, but maybe after you finish the role of religion, we move to ethics as a separate topic.
Let me say that if or since religion is understood in the Kantian term as the only justification there is of ethics, and since many people think that science involves no ethics, like if I look at the world, why should I be helpful to the poor? Why should I be do the good to the environment? In this case, Bunge invents for us a scheme that helps us in justifying the basis of ethics that is acceptable within the realm of religion. And I made the comparison between Maqasid al-Sharia of Shatibi and Mario Bunge, because Mario Bunge has four major goals for ethics and laws. And these goals are presented in the book and also in my paper, How Can Bunge's Scientific Humanistic Ethics Engage Islamic Moral Law? And I can show this in this tree. Is it visible? Okay. So here, the sources of values are basic needs. The primary needs of life. People are escaping causes of death by hunger or extreme weather, extreme cold, extreme heat. And there are secondary needs, such as health and sickness. People seek to be healthy by balanced dietary style, by certain medication, by certain exercise. So we have first and second values, and both of them determines the values of life and the values of health. And then we go to the third level of values, which is well-being, such as, can I participate in a sport activity? Can I go to a poetry debate? Can I dress this beautiful suit or not wear it? Can my father as a child buy me this beautiful fashionable shoes or not? Certainly it leads to my happiness. A beautiful shoes, fashionable shoes is not necessarily causing my health, because even an ugly shoes from a color that I don't like can still achieve my health, but it doesn't lead to my happiness. So in this case, Bunge looks at the behavior of the human being and looks at the behavior of the animals in general. All these creatures are seeking practically to achieve basic values, primary values of health, secondary values of health, primary values of life, secondary values of health, and tertiary values of happiness. The question is how to make the priority, awlawiyat. In this case, He says always the values of life has to be over the values of health, and always the values of health has to be over the values of happiness. This is why Bunge, from a scientific point of view, leads to the conclusion that wine should be prohibited. So wine is an element that leads to happiness. However, it leads to the destruction of health or possibly life. And in this case, wine has no space in the scientific humanistic ethics. And in this case, happiness will hinge on the existence of health and life. He gave us further detailed examples, and I can show you these examples. In these examples, we can see that there are physical, psychological, and social roots for values, and they have to be taken, since they are part of the survival of a human being, they have to be taken as basic needs of the well-being. We can't live without clean air, adequate food, shelter and clothing, safety, physical activity, healthcare, and leisure. All of them are part of the physical realm. Now, psychologically, we like to being loved. We like to practice loving, to be feeling needed, meeting with legitimate wants, learning, stimulation, and recreation. All of them are psychological ones. And finally, in the social ones, we must perform peace, company, mutual help, work, social participation, social mobility, and social security. So now we are talking about a collection of values that help the physical existence of the individual or the society. And therefore, these are taken as necessities. And in other words, these are considered scientifically fara'id. And this goes back to Taha Abdurrahman. Taha Abdurrahman, because of his culturological understanding, he looks that values are in no way derived from the nature of existence. And because they are not derived from nature of existence, values can clash with science. However, Bunge says the opposite, actually. Human values universally are in harmony with science. Why? We have to keep the goal of trustworthiness, amana. Amana, because to uphold transactions. If you're in the market in Chinese system, Indian system, or Arabic system, if you're stealing or cheating, therefore transactions will collapse. If transactions will collapse, the economy will collapse. If economy will collapse, human needs of feeding will collapse. And in this case, we can find a proof, an argument that many of the human values advocated by religion are in many cases shared by non-religious cultures and shared by pre-religious cultures, and even they're shared by the animal kingdom. How sheeps, how monkeys are sharing the food, how they cooperate when the enemy comes, how they teach each other there is a danger in the road. So in this case, if sharing, communicating fear, communicating advantages exist in the animal kingdom, and later on exist in pre-religious as well as religious spheres, therefore we are seeing a generalization that can be accepted by science. So in this case, Bunge is not seeking to generate a war between science and human values and religion. He rather would like to discover where are the points that can facilitate a cooperation between scientific understanding and religious and ethical understanding. And if we compare the five major faculties or goals of Sharia, protection of religion, protection of the mind, protection of the self, protection of lineage, protection of wealth, they are as classified by Al-Ghazali or reformulated based on his teacher Al-Juwayni. These five qualities meet the primary necessities that Mario Bunge is talking about. And in this case, the classification of necessities, needs, and takmiliyat or tahsiniyat, fancies, are embraced in similar manner by Mario Bunge. So we hear unknowingly, for somebody who is uninformed about Islamic civilization, such as Mario Bunge, he is willing to accept the proposals of Ash-Shatibi. And in this case, the clash that our innovative teacher, Taha Abdurrahman, is seeing somehow get dissolved. So we take from Taha Abdurrahman his innovativeness in linguistic expression, exactness, systemicity, and creative expression of the metaphor. However, we don't accept his scientific proposals simply because he's not dedicated to the naturalistic understanding or systematic absorption of the tree of knowledge.
Oh, thank you very much. I was not aware of many of these ideas, so I appreciate the discussion with you. You know, you mentioned Hans Kung. I think Hans Kung was a very important German philosopher who tried to propose kind of universal ethic for or global ethics for a global society, right? And he put kind of different principles and rules. How can we have from our different background, whether if you are a Jewish or a Christian or atheist, secular, different principle where he sees all these values are universal. So my question is like, when we are talking about these two philosophers, are we talking about local values or universal values? And when we are talking about ethics, are we saying like for Abdul Rahman, ethics is something like related to Arab, Muslim civilization or culture, or it's more universal? What is the case with Mario Bunge? Like, what is the role of ethics for them, and what is their understanding or perception of the universality of ethics? Because I think for Abdul Rahman, ethic is, as I mentioned before, and you know this better than me, ethic is fundamental element for his philosophy, right? That's why we called him in Arabic philosopher al-akhlaq, because he based almost all of his contribution on ethics. And but what is the difference between them regarding to the globality and locality of ethics?
Okay, well, this is a very good question. Taha Abdurrahman, it's evident to both Mario Bunge and Taha Abdurrahman that there is a difference, a legitimate difference between local ethics and universal ethics, and both of them should exist and do exist regardless of our conception. I mean, a simple example is cuisine. What Indians eat is different from what Turks eat, and it's different from what Germans are eating. Should we have universal food? Well, it's really a problematic proposal. People enjoy their food because of certain traditions they cultivated through the centuries, because of availability of produce in their relevant environments. So this is just a striking example that we have local ethics and it's cherished, and nobody should tell all Chinese people to switch to German food, and we are not going to ask German food to switch to Indian food. Local ethics does exist and should exist. However, what is the universal ethics? Such as should we advocate the imperial domination of sugar in our drinks or not? That's a universal question. Should we advocate the massive presence of fats in our food? What's the proportion of meat in contrast to the proportion of vegetable? So we can now switch from the question of cuisine to the scientific question of what are the universal elements that can be available in all of our foods. And therefore, should we as Arabs and probably Latin American people and Indians, we stress this carbohydrate heavy meal of bread that generates certain sugar accumulation and then leads to belly fats. This is really a problematic behavior. What is the proportion of loaf of bread to zayt and za'atar or to shawarma in this case. These are universal questions. So Taha Abdurrahman and Bunge, both of them are aware. Certainly, I mean, any philosopher would acknowledge the existence of this problem. However, how to devise a strategy to resolve it is not is clear to Bunge. Bunge thinks that needs are universal. All humans, Indian, Chinese, Arabs, and Americans, has the legitimate right to stay alive and to stay healthy and to achieve some of their legitimate wants of happiness. So these are, humanity universally agrees on life and health. However, the disagreement happens in the values of happiness. Arabic poetry can make me happy. Why Arabic poetry can make a Chinese happy? It will never make a Chinese happy. American music make an American citizen happy with their music, but American music may not make an Arab happy, such as metal rock. It's really detested to many people in the Arab world. What's the artistic value in that? So here we have a space that artistic values that lead to happiness, if they don't clash with life and health or the social integrity of the society, can have a space. We can have a space of appreciation. For example, do I like the Bedouin Rababa? I do not. Am I going to fight the Bedouin Rababa? No, I don't have the right. Does a Bedouin have the right to enjoy the Rababa? They do have the right. So in this case, is the Rababa affecting my life and health or the life and health of the major Arab population? I don't think so. There's no evidence to that end. So in this case, we can, if we avoid wars, exploitation, torture, pollution to the environment, we're going to avoid what attacks the universal. And if we make space to the values of happiness that do not clash with the values of health and life, in this case, we create a difference between the local and the universal, or between the biological and the psychological. Now, is Taha aware of these concerns? In some way, Taha is. However, Taha doesn't present himself as a philosopher for the world. This is very important. He doesn't say that my philosophy is applicable to the Western people, to the Chinese people, to the Slavic people. It's applicable mostly to the Muslims and particularly to the Arabs. So we should not take his statements more than what he claims. And in this case, he tried to universalize within this framework. So he gave us, for example, in terms of mercy, he gave us 3 principles. He tells us in Ruh al-Hadatha, give mercy to others the way you are merciful to yourself. That is in protection of the value of the human. Second principle, give mercy to the non-human the way you are merciful to the human. That is in protection to the value of being. Third principle, give universality derived from mercy priority over any other universality. So here, Taha Abdurrahman is trying to universalize his proposals. He not only would like to practice mercy with Arabs or Muslims, be merciful to all other fellow humans, also be merciful to non-humans, to the animals, to the trees, and finally give the priority of this concept of mercifulness a universal status that precedes anything else. So from that point of view, is Taha Abdurrahman practicing universality? Certainly he is. Now, if you go into the details of how he devising his universal ethics, I will do injustice to him if I say his scheme is applicable to all globalized culture. It's not applicable, and he doesn't claim it to be, and therefore we should not critique him on that domain.
Thank you very much. Maybe the last very short question, I can give you like 1 minute, then we will move to Dr. Sami. I am personally interested, like, what kind of difficulty you had when you translate like Taha Abdurrahman philosophies and idea into English? Was it really because we know he's talking about a specific concept, he construct this concept and he put them within the Arab tradition language, and even we can see similarity, for example, in the way Taha Abdurrahman is writing and someone like Raghib al-Asfahani or Ghazali is writing. So he has this modern classical Arabic language. So I'm very interested to know, like, do you have problems translating him into English, or was it like?
Certainly, Taha Abdurrahman in not the sentential level, but at least in the vocabulary and metaphorical level, could be untranslatable. So I think these are one of the obstacles that can make Taha Abdurrahman not available in other languages, because it not only discusses topics relevant to Arab-Islamic culture, but also topics relevant to the usage of the word and the root. So he goes into the root of the word and exploits the philosophical meaning embedded in the term itself. And this is a very well-known Arabic practice. This is why Islamic civilization started with one book, that is the Quran, and then we ended up with 1 million volume on top of one volume. How did fiqh and kalam and mysticism evolved out of this one volume of the Quran? It's certainly through this massive innovativeness of derivative capacity of moving the language to embrace new meanings and to have a new usage. So translating Taha to English is very problematic, and try to avoid a great deal of sentences and words that they cannot be translated into English. So I really sympathize with any individual who's seeking to do that project. It's like translating poetry. Poetry in Arabic is based on the meters, on the arud, on the music of the line. So if you kill the musicality of the qasida, you kill the poetry, and therefore how can you translate it into English? So that's a very, very heavy price I had to pay. And whenever I translate something, I needed to present it to my English speakers and friends to make the meaning approachable to them. And I kept working on that. And hopefully all the readers of my translations will find them readable, because this is a really challenging task. This is why we in the Arab world are having problems understanding, let's say, Kant, or understanding many elements of Western philosophy. And here Taha Abdurrahman is presenting the issue to us. They say, okay, we have these thoughts, we can translate them into other languages, and other languages cannot be conveyed into Arabic language. So let's do this problem within our sphere and our tool and achieve whatever we can do with the treasure we have, that is the Arabic language.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you very much. I need to stop here. I have much more question, but I think the time is very limited. Inshallah, we will have you more in the future, hopefully. I will turn now to Professor Dr. Sami Al-Arian. I think he will comment or ask a question, and then we will finish the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Fadi, and thank you, Dr. Obiedat, for your presentation. You certainly piqued my interest in reading the book. I do have several points. I took about 4 pages of notes, but because of the time limitation, I'll try to concentrate on the most fundamental. When we talk about the tree of knowledge, that you presented, it really conceptualizes a Western material and secular outlook. I don't think it would be fair to judge or assess someone like Taha Abdurrahman from that standpoint. When we talk about secular versus religious versus scientific worldviews, and you sided with the scientific, I think here we are also using the Western model of what religion is. And I would like to beg to differ that not just because it's, I don't put Islam in that realm of being just religion, because the Tawhidi worldview certainly is based on religion, but certainly is not like other religions. It does have its own distinctive features. In that worldview, we are talking about two main sources of knowledge and truth, where in the secular or the scientific, it really based on, let me say what the two are, and then I'll move to the other one. When we talk about the Tawhidi worldview, we are talking about a universe, trying to read the universe, which is you termed as science, what you can discover, what human endeavor can do, what human efforts, human capacity, continuously, obviously changing. It's always self-correcting. It's limited, it's bound, and it's finite. But also we have the other sources of, or source of knowledge, which is revelation. And of course, that is distinctive to Muslims, because other cultures, other people don't believe in the truthfulness of the Quran. But leave that aside for a moment. When we talk about the Tawhidi worldview, this source of knowledge that comes from universe as well as from revelation, where it's believed to come from God himself as an infinite, constant, unlimited. And that's a source of truth and source of knowledge. So from that conception then is where Taha is coming from. To assess Taha on someone else's model, I think misses the point. And of course, Al-Faruqi really elaborated much about the different principles that goes with that viewpoint. So when we talk about scientific worldview, you're really dismissing that part of it. It is certainly a legitimate worldview, but to come as being the more, because of the word scientific and the way it's perceived as being the more appropriate to understanding the world, I think misses the point of Islamic philosophy. So what is the role, when you come also and define religion in three realms, psychological, social, and cognitive, we really leave the spiritual, and I don't believe the spiritual is the same as the psychological, totally aside, because the whole nature of what the soul is not material. I cannot quantify it, I cannot measure it, I cannot see it, I cannot touch it, and therefore, you cannot deny it exists, but I cannot actually describe what it is, and the same as what the Quran says, that because this is beyond our comprehension. So going back also to Al-Faruqi, when we talk about there are two realms of knowledge, the seen and the unseen, and the revelation gives us a little bit of window on the unseen, and therefore it's illegitimate for at least the Islamic philosopher and Islamic believer of as a source of truth. In your analysis, and of course certainly in the Bunge's analysis and any secular philosopher or scientific philosopher, that is totally discounted. That's totally maybe respected in some circles, but probably disrespected or totally ignored in others. So I think we have to elaborate on these two sources of knowledge and give it its due course, its due credit. I cannot judge someone's different worldview on someone else's model. That's the main point I would like to pursue and hear you out on this, because I think it is important to note that when we talk about an Islamic philosophy or an Islamic worldview or a Tawhidi worldview, I think that's, to me, is more accurate. We're really talking about two sources rather than one. And we are talking about not just a universe, but also revelation, and both combined, we can understand the world. In addition, the salvation part, which you mentioned briefly, that is totally discounted in secular and scientific, because they really do not believe that there is an afterlife. And that's a huge source of people's existence, those who define themselves as believers, and how they perceive life and how they perceive what comes next. someone who does not believe in an afterlife, does not believe that there is something after death, they have a completely different sense. And in that case, both secular and scientific are the same, because there is no science, there is no scientific proof that there is life after death. But that factor is totally discounted in your presentation. And it's not even, doesn't have any the fact that the spiritual part, this could be a myth and imagination for the secular and the scientific, but it does exist in the life, in the faith, in the practice of a believer. So I wanted to see if you could address these issues, and I know they are beyond the few minutes that we have, but certainly it does raise lots of questions. And I hope certainly that I can engage you in other points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sami. I would like just to ask you a chain of simple questions. Do you think mathematics is visible and touchable?
A lot of it is, I am a computer scientist. A lot of it is constructed, and a lot of it has to do with how you perceive certain things. So I can number system, I can think of binary, I can think of decimal, I can think of different number systems. It's all how I perceive them.
Fantastic, but certainly it has a certain logic. You can't perceive them infinitely in many. You can just understand them in certain logics. So, do you think the concept of infinity in mathematics is touchable and visible?
It's certainly logical. I can understand it. You
can understand it, but is it touchable and visible?
No, I cannot touch. There's a lot of things in life that I can't touch, but I believe in them, of course.
Okay, so then according to this, it's spiritual.
Well, I mean, it depends how we define spiritual, because spiritual.
These are the properties you give us for the spiritual, untouchable,
unseen.
And visible.
I mean, no. I mean, there are certain things. Certainly, there is the whole world of unseen. But you can go ahead and make your point. No problem.
Because I want to understand your vocabulary. Because
my vocabulary basically is that there is a lot of stuff that we cannot discover. If something you can discover and believe in, then it becomes a reality. But I cannot discover the afterword. Can
I discover infinity in mathematics?
I mean, it has a definition that I can certainly define, and I can certainly understand.
Afterlife has a definition.
And then it's very difficult for other people to argue with. But in terms of this whole concept of resurrection, of day of judgment, of people coming and held accountable, that's a huge difference. Most people, I think probably the majority of the world, doesn't believe in this. How do you handle it?
I see your point. Beautiful points. Do you think the interpretation of some Islamic philosophers of al-Ma'ad al-Rawhani, do you think this is un-Islamic interpretation?
I believe it's a very minority that the majority would reject it completely, because it defies the language of the Quran. We can go into philosophical arguments.
Why some verses of the Quran are taken as majaz and other verses are not taken as majaz?
Because that's how the Quran was revealed. It has ayat muhkamat and ayat mutashabihat, and it depends which one is this and which one is that.
So when we say يَضَعُونَ أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ, and then we say it's a majaz for putting part of the finger, not all of the finger. Mm-hmm. And when we say وَفَسَالَتْ أَوْدِيَةٌ, and we say it's a majaz, that not the valleys are moving, but rather the water is moving in the valley. We don't have a prophetic interpretation saying these are majaz. We don't have also a companions of the Prophet saying that these are majaz. It's the discoverers of Al-Jahada and his followers later on who started to tell us what is majaz and what's not. And in this case, the end of the majaz is not restricted. We don't know what are the limitations of majaz. So if you think Al-Faruqi's interpretation or someone's interpretation is a limitation on the meaning of the Quran, I don't think this is Quranic.
No, I'm not sure what you're reading. If you're leading to the point, is trying to say that the Jannah and the Nar are things could be the imaginations, and that they were created, so that, you know, that would defy many other texts. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt. But I'm sorry to interrupt. Give him a few minutes to respond, and then you can.
It will not defy. It will open the majaz for many other texts. So for example, it's like somebody who's coming at maqasid al-sharia, and you're looking at let's say thousands of ahkam of the goals of Islamic law, and somebody says the maqsad, the intention of all these ahkam is to assure harmony in the society, or to assure justice in the society, and therefore, let's say la zakata illa fi qamhin aw tamrin aw aqat. There's the charity should be in these 4 types of date, barley, and dried yogurt. And for the person who is, this is a famous fatwa from Qaradawi, that what about the people in Indonesia who can't find these examples? Now the maqasidi jurist will think immediately, say, wait a minute, these are examples of what achieve the justice. So why we allow the jurist to think of the goal and change the ahkam to other ahkams, other rulings, and we don't allow the theologian to think of the goal of the imagination and think of the substance. So for example, whoever does this will have a tree in paradise. Could that tree be something else? So the door of the majaz has been contemplated. Unfortunately, Al-Faruqi and his likes are not matriculated in Islamic traditions. They are uninformed of the ilm al-dalalat, or al-Jurjani, or Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. And these people took the level of Islamic sciences to a very high level of majaz and figure of speech. However, unfortunately, many people of the Islamic awakening came from a sphere outside the Islamic tradition. They did not absorb the levels of ilm al-kalam, the levels of tasawwuf, and the levels of jurisprudence, and stood over all of these, and they said, let's continue the tradition after Ibn Khaldun. We're starting from pre-scholarly level, pre-Ghazali level, pre-Jurjani level, pre-Shatibi level, and now we are stuck with these kind of discussions, saying, oh, my understanding of Jannah and Nar is this, and therefore, if my understanding is not acceptable, therefore this is un-Islamic. But wait a minute. What if this understanding is a majaz? And what if it is a majaz, then it's acceptable of other places? So let's say the case. Many jurists would say welfare state is an Islamic state because it supports healthcare, education, and funding of the people. For a literalist, Zahiri, or a jurist, they say, no. The government is not supposed to give education, healthcare, or infrastructure. All what it needs is just to take zakat. So in the Islamic jurisprudence thinking, we have really advanced example for any average scholar in Islamic awakening. You give them the examples from jurisprudence, they are willing to concede and understand that, yeah, I mean, wait a minute, the zakat is not only the only duty of the state, or sadaqah. You have to reformulate the structure of wealth of the society in order for the people to fulfill justice and well-being. The same goes, unfortunately, our food of thought in the Islamic awakening does not involve sampling from Qadi Abdul Jabbar, Shahristani, Amidi, and Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. And because of lacking these samples, we think that only these interpretations are our creed. And because it is our creed, it is the crucial point of view. I beg to differ. As somebody matriculated in the Islamic sciences, these are not the basis of the Islamic studies. Islamic studies is the ground by which it's built has deeper levels where these problems will dissolve immediately. So when we say, when the Quran says, وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ بِحُسْبَانٍ, is the Quran embracing a Western outlook, materialistic outlook? This is unbelievable.
But no one said that. I mean, you're making constructions that was
okay. So in this case, scientific issues are not Western.
No, scientific. No, it comes under revelation, not at the same level or above it. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, but when the Quran tells you,
science could make mistakes, But revelation, if it comes from God, would not.
I don't submit to that, because in jurisprudence, every statement in the Quran has to have taqeed, restriction, specification, takhsis, majaz, or ta'wil, which means that the revelation itself doesn't give you a list of facts. It gives you a speech that's subject to hermeneutical manipulation. This is what is the ahkam. العلم بالأحكام التفصيلية من أدلتها العملية. So you need now to contemplate what is the revelation is saying. The revelation is not one statement.
That's the human part, yes. But the revelation itself, it's not going to be.
Yeah, but the revelation
you're not going to find
dissolves.
something wrong with the revelation. You're going to find something wrong with the interpretation of that revelation. That's true.
Okay. Well. Now, okay. When you say يخرج من الصلب والتراب, that the human being gets out from the backbone of the back or the chest, is this a scientific statement or a majaz statement?
It's subject to interpretation. As I said, the Quran has mutashabihat and has muhkamat, and not everything. Yeah.
Okay, but now you can't escape from the question. You say
no, not escape. I'm saying, what are you trying to indicate? Are you trying to indicate that there is a mistake, scientific mistake in the Quran? Is that the point you're trying to make?
You're asking the Quran for something it's not proposing. The Quran saying I'm a wahi, but Abu Yarab al-Marzuqi is saying that this wahi is not in the Quran. It's outside the Quran. I'll read you his Arabic, and Abu Yarab al-Marzuqi is not a secularist infidel.
Yeah, but he's not faultless also. He's not faultless.
Of course, but he's articulated in Islamic tradition and in Western tradition. But the Al-Faruqi is neither. So this is a very important point, that the samples of Islamic awakening, such as Sayyid Qutb, Muhammad Qutb, Taqiyuddin Nabhan, they are not educated in Islamic traditions. And
actually,
Taqiyuddin
Nabhani was, but that's beside the point.
Okay, but, so let me read for you what
maybe the last 1 minute or the last
okay
minute.
The statement is, it says في هذا التوجه بعدان سالب مفاده أن الحق لا يطلب من نص القرآن، وموجب مفاده أنه يطلب بتوجيه إلى حيث يطلب، أي الآفاق الطبيعية والأنفس التاريخية. بلغتنا الحديثة الآية تتضمن توجيه الإنسان كمستعمر في الأرض ومستخلف فيها إلى شروط الاستعمار الاستخلاف. And this is the exact wording of Abu Yarab al-Marzuqi. So in this case, you hinge the disagreement on something that Islamic tradition does not grant. So when we say, when Al-Quran tells us وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ بِحُسْبَانٍ repeatedly, or in any other phenomena, does we say that, oh, this is a Western outlook? Well, they looking
no, no one said that. You're knocking down something that was never articulated or said. What I'm trying to say is that the Quran does have lots of statements. The science may agree with some and may disagree with others because of how they interpret it. That doesn't make the revelation wrong. It makes the interpretation wrong.
Okay, but in this case, if is there a revelation without interpretation?
I mean, there are things which doesn't need interpretation. You know, there are things that you give this person that much money for inheritance, that doesn't need interpretation.
I'll give you an example. Yes.
And there are others that it does need. When it says, you know, how you perceive certain matters. I mean, this is really, I didn't really mean to argue because of the time, but I would love to have that conversation at one point because of the implication of your presentation, yes, and how it's perceived and the model that we would like to.
Most of these questions has been discussed in Usul al-Fiqh and in Ilm al-Kalam in great details. And unfortunately, these debates are not part of the Islamic awakening. Taha Abd Rahman and Abu Yarab al-Marzuqi are bringing, and Muhammad Miftah, they're bringing these traditions back and putting them to elevate the discussions that unfortunately members of the Islamic awakening lift us at, let's say, the undergraduate level. These philosophers are asking us to go to the graduate level. And in this case, when you, let's say, يسألونك عن الكلالة. Now, if you tell me there's different interpretations about the meaning of kalala, but if you don't know what's the meaning of kalala, then what's the point? There's no revelation. If you don't find the meaning of something, the revelation of it is not revealed to you. And if it's not revealed to you, you don't grasp the revelation. Or let's say qur', thalathatu quru', is qur' a haida, a period of menstruation or not?
That's very much in the different madhahib, and people accept that. I mean, how you interpret it, because each one has a valid interpretation. So there's nothing wrong with that.
You need to include me and include Ibn Sina as one of the acceptable madhab. So to be acceptable is not just to have a historical.
But if it contradicts something that is not subject to interpretation, then it becomes a problem.
Oh yeah, I mean, all of the fiqh is contradicting something else. For example, لا زكاة إلا في تمر وأقط وشعير. This interpretation of the zakat al-fitr, when you give bread or when you give, let's say, meat or fish, it contradicts what the hadith is saying. So these simple problems has been manipulated by the jurists long time ago. The contradiction of the wahi is the very project of the jurist, because every general has to be specified, every unrestricted has to be unrestricted, and every direct statement has to be moved to the majaz. So when you tell me يَضَعُونَ أَصَابِعَهُم, and I tell you it's أَنَامِلَهُم, it's not their fingers, but it's the part of their fingers, that's a contradiction of revelation. But how it's granted? It's granted through interpretation and hermeneutics, ta'wil. So ta'wil opens the gate. You still acknowledge these revealed points, but you take them to more applicable point. And in this case, this is not a Western model. This is 100% scholastic Islamic model. This is what you will find in a book of usul fiqh like al-Mustasfa. This is what you will find in al-Muwafaqat. So dealing with the contradictions of revelation is the art of Islamic philosophy. And Taha Abdul Rahman and Abu Ya'rub would like to extend this art rather than being scared and saying, oh, salat awdiyatun, it means that the valleys themselves are going to be liquidated. And if we make a fight, are the valleys going to be liquidated or the water in them going to flow? I mean, there's the jurists in older times did not make the fight on that and said, yeah, the majaz is acceptable. And therefore, there's no Western or non-Western in this case. It's certainly human understanding based on rational criteria. And thankfully, we're in Islamic tradition. We have tons of examples to enable us to have a fruitful debate on that. And we can continue this in a different occasion.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, this is very good presentation to think about many different things related to Islam, about understanding for Islam, and about the differences also. Thanks also for Dr. Sami for the critical questions, and thank for all of you. I am sorry I did not. I was not able to ask all of your question I received because of the lack of the time. Inshallah, next time we will be having more time or maybe more space for the question. This is our next activity on Russia war in the Ukraine. Will be by our research fellow, Mr. Owais, Dr. Sami, and Mr. Jalal also. This will be on the 2nd of March. I just get to know about this activity. It's newly announced. So hopefully we will see you also joining our next activity on Russia and Ukraine. Thank you very much, and inshallah till next time and see you in the next book discussion. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.